Welcome to Recovery Rising with Kelly and Reva, a podcast dedicated to exploring the journey of eating disorder recovery through real stories, advocacy, and awareness.
I'm Reva Van Vleet.
And I'm Kelly Doss.
And in these episodes, we share our lived experiences with eating disorders and eating disorder recovery. We are not medical professionals, so we highly encourage you to connect with a mental health and medical professional that specializes in eating disorders if you or a loved one is experiencing an eating disorder. So last week, we shared a little bit about our recovery journeys, what recovery meant and means to us, and kind of went over those stages of recovery as well. So I think before we dive into this episode, Kelly and I connected a little bit before we hit record today. And it means a lot to me to be authentic and honest. And last episode, we shared that we both feel really strong in our recovery, and we're at different spots in our recovery, I guess, is our tenure in recovery. And I just want to be open and honest that I still struggle. I still struggle with, of course, mental health struggles. I have anxiety and depression that I work through every day. And with that, my eating disorder does, those thoughts creep in. And last week I shared that it's not on the table, because going back isn't for me. But I do still struggle. I would say I'm about 2 years into really solid recovery. And my, last relapse was just right before becoming pregnant with my youngest daughter. So it was full of setbacks, and we're going to talk about them today. So I just wanted to lead into this episode with that, and really appreciate, Kelly, you supporting that and your openness and honesty too. So
yeah, that was one of the values, or one of the things we really wanted to do with this, was be authentic and just be very honest with what we're talking about in our life experience.
Yes.
Within those parameters of healthy ways of talking.
Yes, exactly.
And so last week we did talk about recovery, but part of that recovery journey, as we say so many times, is never linear. And we're going to kind of go one step further with that. So what can that mean exactly? Not linear. There's sometimes what we call setbacks in recovery, which is very, very tough. And then there's also what's a relapse. So they are not the same thing. So we just wanted to touch on what those differences are. And you were talking before we recorded this episode. After treatment, I did have a setback. I think just a week or two after I got out. I'm like, oh my gosh, all this for nothing. It was just like I almost spiraled down in the thought process, like, oh, I'm going to relapse again. But then luckily my therapist said, well, you're having a setback. Doesn't necessarily mean you're to relapse. So we just wanted to distinguish between the two. So if you should experience after going through treatment, and you have your very first setback, what can that mean?
Yeah, and exactly. And you shared a little bit what that, looked like for you too. And it is so important when you mentioned like you're having a setback and you connected with your therapist, to really recognize when you may be falling back into, and maybe it isn't like going, like you said, going full blown into those behaviors, but even if you're kind of catching yourself like, hey, this is not really in line with my recovery, who can you go to? What resources or skills that we learned along the way? And that is again why it's so important to connect with mental health and medical professionals specializing in eating disorders, because they will really equip you with those tools and resources that are effective in combating eating disorders. So
yeah, we'll also touch a little bit on microbehaviors too, and how to catch those, just so you know. Again, we talked about eating disorders being very sneaky. Yeah, it's summer, so. But micro behaviors, maybe it's just that awareness piece. Maybe you might catch yourself. Maybe just doing something very, very small. Again, it's not small restrictive like behaviors engaging in, but it's just little ways for the eating disorder to again slow a little bit. Maybe if they aren't or dealt with or behaviors as well. But I also think it's just really important when you um, setbacks. And it's a common thing. I've never met anybody or heard of anybody that goes through treatment a step or two back. Again, it's just, oops, I did a behavior, and you catch yourself, and then you can, move past it, giving yourself that grace, I think, which is so important. So I did not experience grace for my first that I did experience shame. Oh my gosh, all this money I spent, and all the months of hard work I put into it. Oh, it's gonna teeter back. But again, luckily it was caught, so that I could move past it and keep moving forward. And that was not my only setback. Let me be clear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even like, starting off this episode, even like just sharing my story and feeling like kind of like a fraud, like, like, oh wow, I've relapsed and had so many setbacks so many times. And like, well, now if I share my story and that happens again, but that like, it's just recovery isn't perfect. Like we talked about last week and even just like before we hit record today. And so like, what a gift it is to be able to share that with you. And like also think that and I'm committed to recovery and our world is, not healthy in this area, and you're gonna hear us talk about that a lot too as we go on. But when we are talking about like micro behaviors, a lot of those behaviors that we are in recovery, like trying to just try not to do, are normalized in our society. And especially, I mean, now like you see everywhere that celebrities are getting thinner and it's just becoming so normalized. And even as on social media, I mean, I have people uh that are selling the next diet fad to me. They friend requests from them all the time. And so it does it's when you're experiencing a setback that might look like something that's normalized in our society, it is so important to just address that with, a professional, with yourself, just really, take time so it doesn't spiral into a full blown relapse.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And maybe you experienced this too. I called it a little bit of bargaining or trying to maybe rationalize the eating disorder voice. Again,
Yeah.
it's sneaky. So maybe it wasn't as loud as you're going through recovery. Or maybe as direct, but it will maybe try to say, well, I know your team said you can only do this, but it's okay. I mean, it's not going to hurt anything if you go a little bit beyond what your treatment team. So just gonna say, well, what if it's over exercise? And you have an exercise plan, but
Exactly.
you're like, oh, I can keep going or, do something extra outside of that. So again, it's sneaky. You have to really, again, pay attention to those thoughts. So again, it might be a setback if you do go a little bit, but again, if you go as full or again, pay attention to the thoughts and the sneaky eating disorder because it will try to rationalize the micro behaviors or something like that.
And when it feels so heavy to just rational, like it's almost like you're having this like constant conversation with yourself all day long. And it don't. It's like, like, I want to do this. No, you shouldn't do this. It's like just back and forth and just really reframing those thoughts. Again, a skill that you hopefully learn along the way. And so externalizing that, like making sure you have somebody that knows maybe that you are experiencing a setback. So I don't know for you if when you experience that setback, you mentioned your therapist, but also like having some type of accountability system in place. And then hopefully those setbacks get a little smaller and then they just become learning opportunities. And I know for me, like my husband has been a really big support and recognizes those. And and it is a learning opportunity.
I like how you phrase that. opportunity. Because you maybe didn't even notice the little, innocuous things that were happening until the micro behavior happened. So again, it's about catching it, learning from it. And I like too that you said support team. So this should be an essential part. Whether you're doing outpatient or residential inpatient, whatever, there should be that treatment. So that, whenever treatment is phasing out or anything like that, there is that plan in place. So who can you talk to? Who's in that inner circle? Your therapist, your doctor, your friends, family, things like that, so that you can rely on them. So you don't have to do this all alone. So it's when I say, you should always be catching behaviors and things like that. That's part of the treatment team, like you said, your husband.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So it doesn't all help. It really does take a full team. And it's just something ongoing until you get to the point where, you feel like you can, like we talked about, it's not on the table anymore when you get to that point. So, yeah, rely on that team. Give yourself the grace. I think that's something that wasn't talked about with me right away until it actually happened. The setback. She said, "Oh, you should actually give yourself some grace, compassion, forgive yourself. Look at the progress you made. You're not going all the way back. You don't have to go there. You can move forward." I should have been told that early. And I just think,
Exactly. Because I think all or nothing thinking is such is such a big part of eating disorders. And when you're it does, it's like I'm either recovered or I'm not. And it's like that black and white thinking, and there's gotta be a space in between, and there is. And that, like, I remember, this last time coming out of recovery or a residential setting, I felt like it was like I kept saying it was the in between. Like it just felt so messy and so much, and I was experiencing like the setback, and I just had to get through that and give myself that grace, like you were saying, and reach out to other people for grace. Um and I think when you struggle with an eating disorder any time in your life, it can feel like I almost felt kind of like robbed of a sense of like sense of responsibility, or I felt like very childlike, sort of like someone was like I was in trouble if I didn't do well in recovery or something. I'm not sure where that comes from, but I think just giving yourself grace for that, and like it's okay to struggle. But of course it's okay to struggle and then learn.
yeah, it's not failure. A setback, very common again. It's just again part of that not being linear.
Yes.
And also relapse is something that is a common part of the recovery process as well. So it's not failure, it's a learning opportunity. You can move forward. And a relapse doesn't necessarily mean you go all the way back. So it's, like you said, learning opportunity. I think for me, I started to see recovery when the setbacks were fewer and further between. Sounds a little cliche, but that's not perfection, but it's true. It's true. It's again, not going to be perfect. When we talk about micro behaviors too, even though they aren't necessarily related to thoughts like food and weight and all that, I still hear those negative body image type things in my head to this day. So that's part of the progress, because I'm in the 40s and I still have those thoughts. I mean, that's the way I could frame it, but it's like, no, I'm gonna keep learning from this for as long as I live.
Yes. Yeah. You're separating it from who you are. It's not this like correlated piece of, you don't have to do anything about it. You have those thoughts, but it's not like take action or, yeah. And speaking of relapses too, I mean, we talked about it too last week. It gets to a point where you're like, am I really going to recover from this? Is this going to be my life forever? And even having conversations with people and like, there's like, well, you're just going to have to live like this your entire life. Like it's just something you're just always going to have. And that feels so like just demoralizing, or like, it's just like, oh, that sounds terrible.
Mhm.
And so even when you are in that place of relapse, of course, and sometimes it can be a medical emergency, and it's like can be a really dark spot, but it can look different for each person. But it just to always know that recovery is possible,
Mm.
and you're not too far gone ever.
Right.
We're I'm not midlife, I guess. I'm like early midlife. I don't know, 35, but I don't know. Yeah. That when you're, yeah, at any point of your recovery, even if it's been like, 2 years you're in or whatever, at any point, it is recovery is possible. And just a setback and a relapse doesn't mean that it's
Absolutely. And that's actually one of the reasons why we're doing this. Recovery is absolutely possible,
yes.
not only from our own experience of, not seeing the light at the end of the tunnel and you're deep within it, but that's also something I heard too is like, this is just something you have to deal with the rest of your life. And it just felt like, oh, so life only gets so good. Yeah. Like, I just won't do the behaviors anymore, but I'll still have the thoughts and everything of that thriving life. It will just be survival. Which was one of the stages I mentioned this week for me was the survival state. And I thought that was it. I'm going to have to deal with this the rest of it. There's no great vision to look forward to. So I'm really glad you brought that. When people say this is something you have to deal with, in a way, in a way.
Yeah, exactly.
But,
Yes.
but it's not going to be the dumb urgent. It's not something you just live with.
Yeah.
There is the possibility of recovery fully and just living your best life. So
Yeah.
that's the message. Yeah.
It is something that you have to well, I guess I must use me. That's something I have to really, yeah, just be aware of. Like
Mhm.
when we talked about like protecting yourself, or and like I know that I'm not ever, well, I don't ever want to go on a diet, like things like that. I don't think anyone ever should, but or like when we're talking about setting yourself up to not have setbacks, like sense that it is gonna be there, but it's going to be there in a way that you can just combat it, I guess. I mean,
Mhm.
it's going to be in there in a sense where you know that this is something that you've overcome and that you can continue to overcome. And what are those things that you need to put in place to ensure that your recovery is solid?
Mhm. And this is something I know we both wanted to share. Is whether it's a setback or a relapse, just getting the help, the intervention right away is just very, very important. Don't think, oh, it's no big deal or anything like that. Or I know maybe you might feel shame and want to come forward, say, well, I had a setback, but it's really, really important the intervention. Or again, it can spiral into something very fierce.
Yeah.
So having your treatment team, your support team in place throughout this journey
Yeah.
is very, very important.
Yeah, exactly. Just like it's never too early to get help for an eating disorder as soon as it starts, as soon as you have those thoughts that disrupt your life. And it's never too early to guard yourself from setback or relapse.
Yeah. You don't do it alone. And
Yes.
hopefully we'll be part of your journey too. So you, you don't feel alone. Other people have experienced the setback and relapse. A long journey. It's just not a linear process. So, but yes, we do like to end with the message that recovery is absolutely possible and worth celebrating.
Absolutely. It is. Yes. Well, thank you so much for joining us and for being a part of our journey. We'll see you next week. So we talk about celebrating recovery in this podcast. So each week we're going to take a moment to reflect on a time that we celebrated recovery. So Kelly, what is something that you've done, just a small thing that you've done this week to celebrate your eating disorder recovery?
So last week I did talk about part of the recovery process was learning to accept compliments. It's still an area of work for me, but I did receive a very nice compliment instead of deflecting or just thinking in my head, "Oh, I don't mean it." That was actually genuinely able to accept it and so small victory.
I would say, so this last week, my friend got engaged and I was a part of that proposal, and I was just being silly, and I think just kind of like embracing that silly side of myself, with friends and with my family and my kids. I did a lot of that this week. So, I would definitely say that's worth celebrating for me.
Yeah. We'll be doing that each week in each episode.
Yeah, and we'd love for you to share how you celebrate recovery. And I know we kind of touched on that last week, but as we go on, we would love to just the small moments. It can be accepting a compliment or being silly. So if you would like to, you can even private message us, and then we can share that anonymously. Yeah.